Why is my uniform not here? Don't tell me you haven't ironed it, she snapped. I have. It's right here, Bisi said softly, holding out the neatly pressed uniform. She dared a small smile, hoping to appease the girl's temper this morning. Shade snatched the uniform. There is a stain on the collar, she declared after a quick inspection. Are you blind? How could you iron it without removing this stain? Bisi's eyes widened. She had scrubbed that collar the night before until her fingers ached. If there was a stain, it must be stubborn or perhaps just a slight discoloration from long use. I'm sorry. I'll clean it again right away. Bisi woke up before the first light of dawn. In the small stuffy room at the back of the compound, the boys' quarters reserved for the house help, she quietly folded her mat. A faint glow of a roaster and distant rumble of generators told her it was around 5 a.m. This was Ikeja, Lagos, and another long day of work for the house girl had begun. She lit a tiny kerosene lamp and fetched a bucket of water from the outdoor tap for her bath. The water was cold, but Bisi had grown used to discomfort. As she shivered and poured the water over herself, she mentally recited the day's tasks: sweep the entire house, heat water for Madame's morning tea, prepare breakfast for the family, iron the children's school uniforms, and so on. There was never a room for delay or error. Madame Toyin would not tolerate it. By 5:30 a.m., Bisi was already in the main house's kitchen. She tied a threadbare scarf over her cornrow braids and began to boil water. The kitchen was large and modern, with shiny granite countertops and an array of appliances that she was not allowed to touch unless instructed. As the water heated, she moved swiftly, her bare feet padding on the cool tiles. She swept the floors of the living room and hallway, dusting the furniture carefully. Each polished surface reflected her slim figure, a petite 19-year-old girl in a faded dress that had seen better days. Her eyes were tired but focused. She knew any speck of dust left behind could earn her a scolding or worse. Just as she finished setting the dining table for breakfast, she heard Madame Toyin's sharp voice from the top of the staircase. "Bisi!" The woman barked. "Where is my tea? Are you still sleeping?" "No, ma. I'm coming, ma," Bisi replied quickly, balancing a tray with a steamy teacup, just the way Madame liked. A splash of milk, no sugar, and a slice of lemon on the side. She hurried up the stairs. At the bedroom door, she knelt and bowed her head slightly, a gesture of respect and submission. "Good morning, ma," she said softly, holding out the tray. Madame Toyin, a tall, elegant woman in a silk robe, eyed the young maid with thinly veiled irritation. She took the cup and saucer without a word of thanks. Bisi remained on her knees waiting. Madame Toyin sipped the tea and immediately clicked her tongue in displeasure. "Is this supposed to be hot?" "It's lukewarm," she scolded, her face twisted into a scornful frown. "You want to burn my throat this early morning?" Bisi's heart skipped a beat. The tea was only slightly above warm. She had been careful not to make it too hot, knowing Madame's preferences. But there was no use protesting. "I'm sorry, ma," she whispered. She kept her eyes trained on the floor. "Sorry for yourself," Madame muttered, thrusting the teacup back onto the tray so hard that some tea sloshed out, burning Bisi's hand. Bisi winced, but bit her lip to silence any sound of pain. She dared not wipe her hand until she was dismissed. "Go and get the children ready for school. I don't pay you to lazy around," Madame Toyin snapped. She picked up her phone, already scrolling, dismissing Bisi without another glance. "Yes, ma'am," Bisi replied. She rose and backed out of the room quietly, careful not to turn her back fully on Madame. Another rule drilled into her. Always show respect. As she descended the staircase, she allowed herself a quick silent breath to steady her nerves. Her right hand still stung from the hot tea, but she knew there was no time to tend to it. Mr. Femi, the master of the house, would expect his breakfast soon, and the children, Shade and Tunde, needed their uniforms ironed and their shoes polished before they wake up. In the kitchen, Bisi ran her hand under cool water for a second, soothing the redness. She then put on a fraying apron and started preparing a simple breakfast of yam and eggs. Her mind wandered briefly as she cracked the eggs into a bowl. In that moment, she remembered a vlog image from her childhood, a kind woman's face humming a lullaby. Was it her mother? Bisi couldn't recall much. She had been told that her parents died when she was a baby. An aunt in the village had raised her till age 10, then sent her to the city to work and earn her keep. Since then, Bisi had been serving one household after another. This current family, the Ajayi family, took her in 2 years ago. They lived in a fine two-story mansion, yet the warmth and happiness that should fill a home were nowhere to be found. Shaking off the daydream, Bisi focused on her tasks. As the yams boiled and eggs fried, she hurried to iron Sade's and Tunde's school uniforms in the adjacent laundry room. The iron hissed with steam. At 6:30 a.m., Sade's alarm rang through the hallway, a loud pop song that she always played at maximum volume. Bisi knew she needed to be upstairs as soon as possible, or Sade would throw a tantrum. She quickly loaded the food onto the serving dishes and set them on the dining table. Mr. Femi would be down soon, and he hated waiting for his meal. Then, she rushed upstairs to help the children. 16-year-old Sade was by her mirror, pouting as she brushed her hair. The floor was already strewn with clothes. She had likely been trying on outfits even though it was a school day. Tunde, her 18-year-old brother, was still half asleep, sprawled on his unmade bed with his headphones on. The moment Sade saw Bisi, her eyes flashed. "Why is my uniform not here? Don't tell me you haven't ironed it," she snapped. "I have. It's right here," Bisi said softly, holding out the neatly pressed uniform. She dared a small smile, hoping to appease the girl's temper this morning. Sade snatched the uniform. "There is a stain on the collar," she declared after a quick inspection. "Are you blind? How could you iron it without removing this stain?" Bisi's eyes widened. She had scrubbed that collar the night before until her fingers ached. If there was a stain, it must be stubborn or perhaps just a slight discoloration from long use. "I'm sorry, I'll clean it again right away," she offered, reaching for the uniform. But Sade was not in the mood for patience. "This is useless. Now I'll be late because of you." Ololi Buruku, useless person, she hissed in Yoruba under her breath. In a flash of anger, Sade tossed the uniform back at Bisi. The edge of the stiff fabric struck Bisi's face. Bisi felt a sting on her cheek, but immediately bent down to pick up the outfit. "I'm sorry, small madam," she murmured, using the respectful term small madam that Sade insisted on. "I will wash the collar quickly." "Hurry up then," Sade snapped, turning back to the mirror to fix her hair. As Bisi rushed out, clutching the uniform, she nearly collided with Mr. Femi in the hallway. The tall, broad-shouldered man frowned down at her. He was already dressed sharply in a navy blue suit, ready for the office. "Watch it, girl," he said sternly. Then he sniffed the air. "Is breakfast ready?" "Yes, sir. It's on the table, sir," Bisi replied quickly, stepping aside with her eyes lowered. Mr. Femi grunted and continued downstairs. In the bathroom, Bisi scrubbed the collar with soap and a brush as fast as she could. Tears pricked her eyes from the combined stress and the soap salt splashing, but she blinked them away. By the time she returned with the new damp but cleaner uniform, Sade was tapping her foot impatiently in a casual dress. You expect me to wear a wet uniform? Stupid girl. I have decided to wear another one, Shade said coldly. She had indeed pulled out an older spare uniform from her closet. Next time, use your brain before you waste my time. I'm sorry, Bisi whispered. She felt humiliated but held her tongue. She carefully hung the slightly wet uniform near the bathroom window to dry. Meanwhile, in Tunde's room, the young man had finally woken. He beckoned Bisi. Hey, where's my school blazer? And polish my shoes. They are dirty, he ordered. Unlike Shade, Tunde's tone was more bored than angry, but he treated her with the same disrespect, as if she was invisible, unless he needed something. Bisi found his blazer draped on a chair and quickly brushed it. Then she knelt to polish the black leather shoes he had left by the door, caked with dust from yesterday. As she walked the polish with a rag, Tunde hovered over her, texting on his phone. Suddenly, he chuckled and nudged her shoulder with his foot. Guess what? That girl I met at the party texted back, he said casually, as if Bisi were a friend. Before she could even respond, he added with a smile, She's way out of your league, house girl. People like you will never attend the kind of parties I go to. Heat rose to Bisi's cheeks. She hadn't replied at all. He was just looking for a chance to demean her. Yes, sir, she mumbled simply, keeping her focus on the shoes. Tunde laughed under his breath, apparently satisfied by her submissiveness. Hurry up, I have to go. At last, the children were dressed and ready. Bisi followed them downstairs, carrying their school bags. At the dining table, Mr. Femi was already eating. He barely looked up as his children sat. Madam Toyin joined them, elegantly dressed in a lace blouse and wrapper, her face made up perfectly, even for a morning at home. Bisi stood by, ready to serve. She began to dish the yam and egg for Shade and Tunde, but Shade wrinkled her nose. I don't want yam. Didn't I tell you I'm on diet? You never listen. Sorry, I can get bread for you instead, Bisi offered quickly. Madam Toyin glared at Bisi. Idiot. Must my daughter repeat herself every day? Go and bring the bread and make tea for the children. Yes, ma. Bisi hurried to the kitchen again. She fought back the frustration welling in her chest. They never told me about any diet, she thought, but she knew better than to say that aloud. In a minute, she returned with sliced bread and butter and a fresh pot of hot water with tea bags. As she poured tea for Shade, a loud clatter made her jump. Mr. Femi had slammed his hand on the table. This egg is too salty, he growled, pushing his plate away. Do you want to give me high blood pressure? Bisi immediately bowed her head. I'm sorry, sir. Madam Toyin stood up in anger. So you want to kill my husband now, eh? Useless girl. She turned to her husband and gave a sugary smile. Honey, I'll fry another batch of eggs myself. Don't mind this stupid girl. Without another word, Madam Toyin strode to the kitchen. Bisi's stomach clenched with fear. It was never a good sign when Madame took over a task. It meant she was too angry and would surely find a way to punish her for it. Sure enough, after a few minutes, Madame Toyin called from the kitchen. Bisi, come here. Bisi nervously entered the kitchen. Madame Toyin pointed to the frying pan on the stove where she was already frying new eggs. Did you even taste the food you cooked? How could you put a whole spoon of salt? I'm sorry, ma, Bisi apologized, even though she remembered adding only a little pinch of salt. Perhaps the stock cubes had enough salt already. It didn't matter now. Madame's eyes were ablaze. Sorry? Your sorry does nothing. Because of you, my husband would think I don't manage this house well. In her fury, Madame Toyin suddenly grabbed the hot frying pan, barehanded, and flung it into the kitchen sink with a crash. Oil and half-cooked eggs splattered everywhere, some drops scalding Bisi's arm. Bisi yelped in pain before she could stop herself. Her arms stung, but she quickly covered her mouth, trembling. Madame Toyin stepped closer, raising a finger threateningly. If you weren't such a wretched girl, I would have sent you packing today. But no, you have nowhere to go. and I am too kind. She practically spat out the last words. Clean this mess up right now, and next time, if I found one tiny mistake in my kitchen, you will not eat for 2 days. I promise. Tears of pain and humiliation gathered in Bisi's eyes. But she kept her head low. Yes, ma. Thank you, ma. She managed to say. Thank you for not throwing her out, she supposed. It was true. She had nowhere else to go. Being on the streets of Lagos could be even worse. As Madame Toyin left the kitchen to rejoin her family at the table with the freshly cooked eggs, Bisi clutched her burnt arm. The spot throbbed, and a few small blisters were already forming. She ran it under the tap, biting her lip to keep her from crying out loud. Mommy, we'll be late to school. She heard Shade complain from the dining room. The voices soon moved towards the front door. Mr. Femi was likely driving the children to school on his way to the office. Moments later, the car engine started and the automatic gates whirred open. Bisi peeked through the kitchen window and watched the black SUV pulled out into the street. She sighed in relief. Once it was quiet, at least she would have some peace while they were gone for the morning. Left alone in the house, Bisi quickly ate the scraps of breakfast left on the table, a few pieces of yam and a small bit of egg. It wasn't much, but she dared not to take more without permission. She recalled how once, early on, she had taken an extra slice of bread because she was dizzy with hunger. Madame Toyin found out and starved her for a full day as punishment. Never again, Bisi told herself. After tidying up the dining table and washing the plate, Bisi moved through the house to continue her chores. She scrubbed the kitchen floor where the oil had splattered, every movement causing her burnt arm to ache. She washed the pile of clothes that had accumulated, mostly the family's fine clothes, along with a few of her own faded garments. By noon, sweat was dripping down her face and her stomach growled with hunger. Lunch for her would likely be a small portion of whatever was left from the family's lunch, if anything. As she hung the clothes on the line behind the house, Bisi paused to stretch her back. The sun was high and harsh now, and she could hear the distant sounds of Lagos life beyond the compound walls. A street hawker calling out, "Bole, bole," roasted plantain, and the rumble of a Danfo bus laboring around the road. For a brief moment, she imagined stepping out of the gate, buying a roasted plantain with her own money, and enjoying it freely under the sky. But that was just a dream. She had no money of her own. Madame Toyin kept her salary for safekeeping and rarely gave her more than a few hundred naira if she absolutely needed something. Returning inside, Bisi dusted the sitting room again and decided to take out the trash. She gathered the garbage and headed for the big bins outside the gate. As she walked down the driveway, the midday sun made her squint. The driveway was lined with flowers, their purple blossoms vibrant against the white walls of the mansion. The beauty of the place always contrasted sharply with the ugliness she experienced within it. At the gate, Baba Musa, the elderly security man, was sitting on a stool, nodding off in the heat. He was one of the few people who treated Bisi kindly. He often shared a bit of his lunch, usually simple Hausa cocoa porridge or bread, with her or slipped her candy, saying it was from his granddaughter. "Good afternoon, Baba," Bisi greeted softly. He startled awake. "Ah, Bisi. Good afternoon. How are you, my dear?" He noticed her arm, which she had hastily wrapped in a clean rag. "What happened to your arm?" Bisi hesitated. "It's nothing. I just burned it a little while cooking," she said, trying to sound casual. She didn't want to get into trouble for speaking about what happened. The old man's eyes saddened. He was not stupid. He had seen and had enough in this household. "Sorry, my dear," he said kindly. He reached into his pocket and handed her a small packet of ointment. "Take. Use this rub balm. It will help the pain." Grateful, Bisi took the balm. "Thank you, Baba." He just shook his head with a sigh. "You are a good girl. God is watching. One day One day things will be better. Inshallah, he said, raising his hand as if in a brief prayer. She nodded and managed a small smile. Amen, she replied quietly. Though she was Christian, she understood his Hausa expression of faith and appreciated it. Heading back towards the house, Bisi rubbed some of the ointment on her bun. It gave a cooling relief. She reminded herself to hide the balm later. If Madame saw it, she might ask questions. In the afternoon, Madame Toyin returned home alone. She often attended meetings for a women's charity or went shopping after her morning routine. The moment she stepped in, she called for Bisi. Bisi rushed to take the shopping bags from Madame's hands. Madame Toyin inspected the living room with eagle eyes. She ran a finger over a side table and clicked her tongue. Dust. Didn't you clean here? Bisi's stomach tightened. I did, ma. Perhaps some dust came in from outside. I'll clean it again now, she said quickly, setting the bags aside and picking up a cloth. She wiped the table again, even though it was already clean. Madame Toyin sat on the sofa and watched her with a critical gaze. Be quick and put the things I bought in their place. Then start preparing lunch. I'm expecting 2 guests at 2 p.m. Make jollof rice, and it better taste good. No oversalted nonsense like this morning, she warned. Yes, ma, Bisi answered. She took the shopping bags. They contained a few expensive-looking fabric wrappers and shoes. She carried them to Madame's bedroom and carefully arranged the new purchases in the closet. Back in the kitchen, Bisi started on the jollof rice. She brought out tomatoes, peppers, spices, and rice, and started blending and frying. As she worked, she hummed a Yoruba gospel song to herself softly, a habit that comforted her even when exhausted. The rich scent of tomatoes and spices filled the kitchen as the rice simmered. Shortly before 2 p.m., the doorbell rang. The guests must have arrived. Wiping her hands, Bisi hurried to answer. She opened the door to see 2 women elegantly dressed and holding handbags that screamed wealth. They swept past her without so much as a greeting, as if she were part of the furniture. Bisi closed the door quietly and trailed them. The guests made themselves comfortable in the living room, exchanging loud, exciting greetings with Madame Toyin. From their conversation, Bisi gathered they were fellow society women from the charity organization. Ah, Toyin, your house is always so sparkling, one of the women exclaimed. Madame Toyin laughed lightly. Thank you, my dear. I do my best to keep a good home. Bisi, who was bringing in a tray of cold drinks for the guests, felt a pang of injustice at that statement. It's me who keeps it clean, she thought, but said nothing. She offered the tray to the first guest. The woman took a drink and glanced Bisi briefly. Is this your house girl? She's so thin. Are you feeding her at all? Though her tone was joking, there was a hint of disapproval. Madame Toyin's smile faltered slightly. She gave Bisi a quick up and down look, as if seeing her properly for the first time in ages. Oh, she eats plenty. Bisi, have you had your lunch? She asked in a sugary voice that was clearly for show. Not yet, ma, Bisi replied softly. Feeling all eyes on her, she usually waited until after serving the family and guests to eat whatever leftovers there might be. You see, she hasn't eaten, the second woman tottered. Madame Toyin waved a hand dismissively. That's because she was busy. Anyway, I take good care of my workers. Bisi, go and bring your rice. Her tone made it clear. That was the end of the discussion. Yes, ma, Bisi said and rushed off. In the kitchen, she fought back an unexpected wave of anger and hurt. Madame never cared if she ate. Now, in front of guests, she pretends to be kind. It wasn't surprising, no, but it still stung. She dished out the jollof rice on 2 fine china plates, garnishing each with fried plantains and chicken. Carefully, she carried the plate out on a tray and served the madame and her guests. The rich red rice and golden plantains looked delicious. The women eagerly began to eat. This is good, one guest said. Yes, the taste is lovely, agreed the other. Madame Toyin smiled proudly, as if she had cooked it herself. Eat small, there is plenty, she said graciously. As they ate, the women gossiped about acquaintances and events. Mrs. stood by in case they needed anything, trying to be invisible. Her stomach growled quietly at the aroma of the food. One of the women dabbed her lips and said, "By the way, Toyin, I had some strange talk the other day. Do you remember Chief Ajayi that died about 18 years ago? The one who used to own a big electronics business." Mrs. ears pecked at the name Ajayi. That was the surname of the family she worked for, though she rarely had it. Mr. Femi's surname was Ajayi. Madam Toyin's smile tightened slightly. "Chief Damilare Ajayi. Yes, I recall. He was my husband's elder brother," he said carefully. "Oh, that's right. So you would know about his story. They say he had a baby daughter who died with the mother in an accident, and that's how your husband inherited the estate," the woman continued, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret. "Or someone was telling me the other day that the baby might have survived. Can you imagine? After all this time." The second guest laughed lightly, waving the idea away. "That sounds like those crazy rumors. How could the baby survive if the mother died and there was an accident? And we never saw such a child growing up, did we?" Madame Toyin's fork clattered on her plate suddenly. She quickly recovered, forcing a smile. "People like to gossip nonsense. My husband took over the house and business after the tragedy because there was no surviving child. If there were, we certainly would have taken the child in." Of course. The first two men nodded. "It's probably nothing. Just some talk I overheard at the club. You know how people are." As the conversation shifted to another topic, Mrs. Hart was pounding. A baby, a dead mother, a surviving child. She had no idea about Chief Ajayi's story, but something about it made her uneasy. It sounded like a family secret she was not meant to hear. She dared not show any reaction, keeping her eyes down, while her mind raced. So this house belonged to a chief before, and he died leaving a baby who died too? She glanced softly at Madame Toyin. The woman had recovered her composure, laughing at a new joke. But for a moment, Missy had seen a flicker of something like fear or anger on her madame's face. The guests eventually finished their meal and moved back to the sitting room for more chat. Bisi cleared the plate quietly. In the kitchen, she quickly ate a small portion of jollof rice left in the pot, her thoughts still on the overheard conversation. Could it be just idle gossip? Or was there some truth? Why did Madame react that way? She recalled that when she first came to the house, she had seen an old framed photograph in the storage room while cleaning. A picture of a man in traditional Yoruba attire with a woman and a baby. She hadn't known who they were at the time, and the next week that photograph had vanished. Perhaps Madame Toyin stored it away or threw it out. Now that she thought of it, the man in the photo did resemble Mr. Femi a bit. Maybe that was the late Chief Ajayi and his family. A strange feeling settled in her chest. She brushed it off, thinking, it's not my business. I should focus. That evening, after the guests had left, Mr. Femi and the children returned home. Shade was complaining loudly about some issue at school. Tunde was on the phone with a friend, and Madame Toyin was relaying the day's social gossip to her husband. Everything seemed normal, but Bisi noticed that when Madame got to the part about the rumor one of the guests mentioned, both she and Mr. Femi quickly went quiet, exchanging a look that Bisi could not read. Mr. Femi then asked in a low voice, "Who told her that? Did she mention any names?" "No, just said she overheard it at the club," Madame replied, sounding annoyed. "It's probably nothing, but we have to be careful. You know how things are in this city. People are always looking for scandal." He nodded. "We have kept things quiet for so long. I doubt anything will come of it now." They became aware of Bisi's presence then. She was in the corner of the living room dusting an already clean shelf. She made a show of adjusting a vase, pretending not to have had anything. But Adoyi fixed her with a hard stare nonetheless. "What are you doing there? Didn't you finish dusting earlier?" "I'm just finishing up, ma," Bisi responded meekly and left the room to give them privacy. Her hands trembled slightly as she walked away. There was indeed something being hidden. Later that night, after cleaning up dinner, She retired to her little room in the boys' quarters. It was past 10 p.m. She was exhausted, body and soul. She lit her kerosene lamp again and sat on her mat. Gently, she rolled up her sleeve to check the burn on her arm. It was a nasty blister now. She applied a bit more of the balm from Baba Musa and winced. From the main house, she suddenly heard raised voices through the open window. It sounded like an argument between Mr. Femi and Madam Tony, though the words were muffled. This wasn't common. Usually, the couple presented a united front, especially in mistreating the help. Curious and concerned, Bisi quietly stepped outside her door and crept a little closer across the dark yard. Staying in the shadows, the living room lights were on, and the curtains were partly drawn. She could hear them more clearly now. "This is risky, Femi," Madam Tony was saying, her voice high and tight. "If someone is investigating, what do we do? We can't let them find anything." A pause, then Mr. Femi's deep voice responded. "There is nothing to find. The girl died that night with her mother. End of story. They can investigate all they want. They won't find her." Mrs. Hart thudded. They were talking about that girl, that baby. "But they could find evidence. I don't know, medical records, or someone might talk," Madam Tony insisted. "We took care of it," Femi replied sharply. "The nurse was paid off to sign the death certificate, unless she suddenly grows a conscience after 19 years, which I doubt." 19 years? Missy was 19. She felt a chill despite the warm night. It had to be a coincidence. She kept listening. "What about the lawyer? That family lawyer what was his name? Mr. Okon. He wasn't convinced back then. You recall?" Toyin said anxiously. "He left Lagos. And even he hasn't kicked the bucket. He has no proof. The will was taken care of. I am the only heir on record," Femi said, sounding irritated but also trying to reassure. "Toyin, relax. We have lived here almost 2 decades. No one has challenged us. People will gossip and then move on to the next thing. We just have to stay calm." Madam Toyin didn't respond immediately. When she spoke again, her voice was lower, but Bisi could still catch it. "Fine. But what about that girl, Bisi?" "You don't think..." Bisi's breath caught. "Me? What about me?" "What about her?" Femi replied. "She's just a house girl from nowhere. Sometimes I feel like..." Toyin trailed off, then scoffed. "No, it's silly. It's just when those women talked about the baby possibly surviving and then looking at her. Never mind." A short silence followed, and then Femi said firmly, "Don't even start with that. It's a coincidence that she's around the same age. That baby died, and even if by some miracle she didn't, this filthy girl could not be her. We found Bisi through an agent, remember? She's from some village in Oshun. The agent said, 'Don't let your guilt make you see ghosts.'" He gave a short, harsh laugh. Madam Toyin sighed. "You are right. I'm being foolish. It's just guilt, I guess. I do feel a bit guilty sometimes, seeing her work so hard here. In what was her..." "No, forget it." Mrs. mind was spinning. What was her? Her heart hammered against her chest. Were they implying that she might be that child? It sounded impossible, like an unbelievable twist of fate. But if it were true, then these people, her so-called employers, would have stolen her inheritance, her life. She felt dizzy and stepped back, accidentally crunching a dry leaf underfoot. The sound made her freeze inside. The conversation halted. "Did you hear something?" Toyin asked. Bisi did not wait to hear more. She suddenly darted back to her quarters, shutting the door softly. Her hands were trembling uncontrollably now. She sat on the mat, trying to steady her breathing. 1,000 thoughts raced through her head. She tried to recall her earliest memories. The woman who raised her in the village, Mama Aina, had always been kind but distant. She used to say Bisi was a gift to her, but she couldn't afford to keep her after a while. That's why she arranged for Bisi to work in the city, saying it was for her own good. There was no mention of real parents or accident. Could Mama Aina have been the nurse or someone involved? Did she know the truth? Tears rolled down Bisi's face as the magnitude of what she overheard sank in. If she was indeed the daughter of the late Chief Ajayi, this house, the very house where she scrubbed floors and was beaten, was her own father's house. These people she called Sir and Ma were just cruel strangers. They might be the ones who took everything from her and reduced her to this. She wanted to scream, to burst into the living room and demand answers, but fear held her back. They were powerful, and she was just a maid in their eyes. If she confronted them without proof, they could hurt her or throw her out before she learned more. Through her tears, Bisi knelt on the floor and began to pray softly. "Oh God," she whispered, voice shaking, "if this is true, if I am who they say, please show me the way, protect me. I have no one but you." She cried herself to sleep that night, the questions and prayers still mingling in her mind. The next morning dawned heavily and grey, with clouds hanging low as if reflecting the turmoil in Bisi's heart. She rose from her mat, exhausted and puffy-eyed. Despite the storm of emotions inside her, she forced herself to continue as usual. If she acted differently, the family might suspect she overheard them. She had to be careful. As she went about her morning tasks, she secretly observed the Ajayi family with new eyes. Madam Toyin looked a bit tense. Her laughter forced as she saw her husband and kids off for the day. Mr. Femi was quieter than usual, and he left in a hurry, muttering about some business at the bank. After they left and the house was quiet, Bisi knew what she needed to do. She had to find proof, something that could confirm her true identity or the fraud of this family. But where to start? The house was large, but she had cleaned every nook and cranny over the past 2 years, except perhaps for Mr. Femi's private study. He usually kept it locked and only he cleaned it. This morning, however, he had left in a rush, and in his haste, Bisi had noticed something. The key to the study, which he usually carried, was still on his hook by the kitchen door. Likely he forgot to take it. Her heart pounded as she took the key. This was risky. If he came back or if Madame caught her, it would be disastrous. But an inner voice urged her on. This might be my only chance, she thought. She tiptoed to the heavy wooden door of the study, down a small corridor off the main living room. With a shaky hand, she inserted the key and turned it. The door clicked open. Inside, the study was dim, curtains drawn. Bisi entered and quietly shut the door behind her. The scent of old books and leather filled the air. She had only been in here a couple of times when summoned to bring tea, and even then under supervision. Lined with bookshelves and a large mahogany desk, the study looked like a place of secrets. She went straight for the desk. Papers were neatly stacked, and there was a locked drawer. She tried the drawers. The top ones opened easily, revealing files and documents. She riffled through them quickly. Most were about electronics business, property deeds in Femi's name, bank statements. Then she found a yellowed envelope at the bottom of one file. It was labeled with shaky handwriting, birth certificate, Ajayi, and another word that was smudged. Bisi's fingers trembled as she pulled it out. Inside was an old birth certificate paper. She read it silently, her breath catching. Name. The name was partly faded. Lola Ajayi. Date of birth, 19 years ago to the date. The exact day she knew as her birthday. Parent, Chief Damilare Ajayi. Father, Mrs. Eniola Ajayi. Mother. It had to be Omolola or Adeola, something ending with Lola. Her own name given by her village aunt was Bisola, which also ended in Shola. Coincidence or clue? And the date matched her birthday exactly. The parents' names, she had never heard of them before, but she knew Mr. Femi's surname was Ajayi. This was proof that a baby girl, Ajayi, was born and didn't necessarily die. Her heart swelled, then fell. This alone wasn't proof she herself was the baby, but it proved the baby existed. She continued searching the envelope and found an old color photograph folded inside. Opening it, she gasped softly. It showed a smiling young woman in a hospital bed, cradling a newborn. with a man standing beside them, beaming with pride. She recognized the man from the framed photo she had seen in storage, likely Chief Damilare. The woman must be his wife, Eniola, and the baby, that baby could be her. Tears blurred her vision. For the first time, she was seeing what could be her mother's face. The baby in the photo and a tiny bracelet on its wrist. The same one that even now sat in Bisi's small box of personal items. Mama Aina had said it was found with her. Bisi's hand covered her mouth to hold back a sob as all these pieces came together. She carefully folded the photo and birth certificate back into the envelope and tucked it into her apron pocket. This was something precious and dangerous. She had to hide it. Suddenly, she heard the front door bang open. Footsteps. Madame Toyin was back. Perhaps she forgot something or returned early. Panic seized Bisi. She quickly closed the drawers and darted behind the door, just as it swung open. Madame Toyin stood at the threshold, eyes narrowing at the sight of the study door unlocked. What? She muttered, stepping in. Bisi's mind raced. If Madame saw her in here, it was over. With Madame still looking at the desk, Bisi silently slipped out behind her, heart in her throat, and managed to pull the door closed behind Madame, noticing in that second. She quietly hurried down the corridor, hiding the envelope deeper in her apron. "We left this door open," she heard Madame Toyin exclaim from inside the study. The woman came out swiftly and looked around. She spotted Bisi emerging from the corridor. "You, what were you doing back there?" "I was cleaning the corridor, ma," she lied quickly, holding up her feathered duster, which she had snatched from a table on her way out. Her voice shook a bit despite her effort to stay calm. Madame Toyin eyed her suspiciously, then huffed. "Were you in the study?" No, ma. "I don't have the key, ma," Bisi said, lowering her eyes. Technically, she didn't have it now. She had left it in the lock. Madame clicked her tongue, irritated but seemingly convinced by the logic. "Useless. Anyway, I forgot my phone." She held up the missing device, then glared. "Since I'm here, start making lunch and sweep the backyard. I saw leaves everywhere." "Yes, ma," Bisi replied, curtseying slightly. As Madame turned away, satisfied with the scolding, Bisi allowed herself to quiet exhale. That was too close, but she had the documents now, hidden proof of the life she lost. All through making lunch and finishing chores, Bisi's mind was on the next step. She had evidence, but what to do? She couldn't exactly walk into a police station and claim she was Chief Ajayi's daughter with just a paper and photo. Or could she? Maybe with a DNA test that could be verified if there were any samples of her parents. But that might require help. She thought of the conversation last night. They mentioned a nurse and a lawyer named Mr. Okon, who suspected something. If she could find either of them. But she was kept under close watch, and she had no real freedom of movement beyond small errands, and who would believe a maid's story over a rich man's word? Her thoughts turned to Baba Musa, the security man. He was kind and had seen things. Could he help get her story out? Or perhaps, could the police anonymously? But if police came and she was wrong or didn't have enough proof, the family would retaliate. While she mulled over her options, fate intervened that very evening. It was around 7 p.m. after dinner. The family was gathered in the living room watching a popular TV soap. Bisi was clearing the dishes in the kitchen when she heard a commotion at the gate. Raised voices, then Baba Musa's agitated tone. She paused, wiping her hands on a towel. Suddenly, the front door burst open and 2 uniformed police officers stepped in, followed by a tall man in plain clothes. They looked serious. Startled, Madame Toyin and Mr. Femi jumped up. "What's the meaning of this?" Mr. Femi demanded, though his voice had a quiver. Shade and Tunde stood off to the side, eyes wide. Bisi, hearing the intrusion, crept to the dining room doorway to witness what was happening, her heart pounding. "Police? Here?" The lead officer, a stern-faced woman, held up a hand. "Mr. and Mrs. Ajayi, we have orders to search this house and detain certain individuals." "Detain? On what grounds?" Madame Toyin exclaimed, feigning outrage, though her face had gone pale. The plainclothes man stepped forward, holding up a document. On grounds of fraud, conspiracy, and theft, Mr. Femi Ajayi. He looked to be in his 50s, and something about him seemed familiar to Bisi, though she was sure they had never met. Perhaps she had seen him in a picture, then it clicked. When he turned slightly, the light caught his face. He looked like an old version of the man in the photo she found in the study. Could this be a relative or the lawyer Mr. Okon they had mentioned? Mr. Femi bristled, but there was terror in his eyes. This is absurd. I am a respected businessman. What fraud? The man fixed a hard gaze on him. The fraud of stealing your late brother's estate and hiding the existence of his rightful heir. At those words, a gasp escaped Bisi's lips. Before she could stop it, all heads turned towards the sound, and she stepped out of the shadows of the dining area, her heart in her throat. The officer noticed her. And you are? She's nobody. The housemaid, Madame Tony said quickly, shooting daggers at Bisi with her eyes as if warning her to keep silent. The plainclothes man's eyes softened as he looked at Bisi. What is your name, my dear? Bisi's voice caught in her throat. Could she trust this situation? Everything was happening so fast. She glanced at Mr. Femi and Madame Tony. The man looked like he might explode. The woman like she might faint. Something told her the time for hiding was over. This was her chance. My name is... I've been called Bisi, sir, she said quietly. The man nodded kindly. Who gave you that name? Bisi was confused by the question, but answered, my auntie, she raised me in the village, sir. He gave a sad smile. I thought so. Bisi, do you know who your real parents are? By now, tears were forming in her eyes, and her hands that clutched the dish towel were shaking. No, I was told they died when I was a baby. And this, the man nodded, then turned back to face the police officers and the others. That's what they wanted her to believe, officers. That girl is the rightful daughter of Chief Damilare Ajayi and his wife Eniola. Her real name, given at birth, is Omolade Ajayi. No! Shouts came from Mr. Femi. He launched forward as if to grab Bisi or the man, but one of the police officers quickly restrained him, holding his hands firmly behind his back. This is nonsense. Lies, he spat. That baby died. Madame Toyin looked wildly between the man and Bisi. She's just a maid. She's not... How can she be? We took her in from an agent. Her voice faltered as the evidence against them mounted. The man, who Bisi now realized must be Barrister Okon, stepped further into the room. Stop this charade, Toyin, he said sternly. I am the family lawyer who handled Chief Ajayi's estate. I knew something was wrong when you claimed the baby died but never produced the proper death certificate for her. And you, Femi, pushed to inherit everything quickly. He gestured to the officer, who handed him a file. He opened it and pulled out some documents. Here is a sworn statement from Nurse Amina Mohammed, the nurse who attended Eniola's delivery. She admits that on the night of the supposed accident, there was no car crash on Third Mainland Bridge, as you reported. Instead, Eniola died from childbirth complications in the hospital. Before she passed, she begged the nurse to protect her baby and not let her brother-in-law take her. Eniola had overheard enough to fear for her child's safety under you. Bisi felt as if she couldn't breathe. Piece of the puzzle she had only glimpsed were now laid out fully. She was that baby. Her mother died giving birth to her, and even in her last moment, her mother tried to protect her. Barrister Okon continued, voice ringing with righteous anger. Nurse Amina confessed that she helped smuggle the baby out that night. She staged the baby's death and handed the child to a trusted friend. That was the woman who raised Omolade, or Bisi, as she is known. That auntie in the village was no king or a guardian. All eyes were on Bisi now, who stood trembling. She wished she could remember any of this, but she had been a newborn. She only remembered Mama Aina's gentle face as far back as toddler years. The policeman then spoke up, addressing Bisi softly. We have the result of a DNA test as well, dear. We obtained a sample from you some weeks ago from a personal item secretly and compared it to preserved samples from your mother's belongings. It's a match. There is no doubt you are their daughter. At those words, Bisi felt a flood of relief, shock, and overwhelming emotion wash over her. She was somebody. She had a family name, an identity beyond a servant. A sob burst from her lips and tears streamed down her face. Mr. Femi, still restrained, shook his head violently. This is all a conspiracy. She probably plotted this with you people. Barrister Cone turned a hard gaze on him. Enough, Femi. The game is over. I had been quietly investigating for years, but without the child, we had only suspicious. When I got word that Nurse Anna was terminally ill and wanted to come clean, I took action. Then, Mr. Musa, your own gatekeeper, who worked here since your brother's time, helped me by confirming that a girl around that right age was in your household as a maid. Everything fell into place. At this review, Mrs. eyes widened. She looked towards Baba Musa, who stood hesitantly by the doorway with his cap in hand. The old man gave her a small hopeful smile. So, he had known, or at least suspected, and played a part in helping her. Mrs. Hart swelled with gratitude. The living room was chaotic with emotion. Shade and Tunde were huddled together near the couch, shock playing on their faces. They had just discovered that the girl they tormented was their cousin, and that their own parents had deceived them and everyone for years. Shade spoke up in a small voice, trembling. Mommy, Daddy, is it true? Bisi is family. The spoiled arrogance was gone, replaced by confusion and fear. Madame Toyin's eyes overflowed with tears now. She broke away from officer's grip and suddenly fell to her knees on the floor. With her hands cuffed behind her, she looked up at Bisi with despair. Omolade, my dear, she cried. If we didn't take it, someone else in the family would. And then, we raised you, didn't we? We gave you a home. These past 2 years, her words stumbled out pathetically. Bisi looked down at the woman who had caused her so much pain. She felt a swell of confliction, emotions, anger, betrayal, but also a strange pity. Raised me? She echoed. Her usually soft voice now thick with emotion. You abused me. You treated me like I was less than nothing in my own father's house. Saying those words made it real, and her tone wavered. You knew who I was, and still, you made me suffer. But Antoine bowed her head, sobbing openly now. She had no defense. Mr. Femi ceased, struggling, and slumped as the weight of the feat fell on him. The officer began to formally read him his rights and the charges: forgery of legal documents, including a falsified will, fraud, conspiracy to endanger a child, and more. They cuffed his wrists behind his back. Madame Antoine was also pulled up to her feet. Her hands already bound, she didn't resist, only continued to weep. As they were being led to the door, Tunde rushed forward, tears in his eyes. Dad, what's going to happen to you? Mr. Femi paused, looking at his son with shame. I'm sorry, my son, was all he managed before the police officers ushered him out. Shade was shaking, crying softly. Mommy, please. Madame Toyin looked back at her children. Stay with your auntie, Kemi, she whispered. I'm so sorry. Her eyes went to Bisi one last time. Omolade, I'm deeply sorry. We wronged you. Have mercy. Bisi met her eyes, and for a moment she saw not a proud madam, but a broken woman. Bisi said nothing, her silence heavy with all the hurt and forgiveness she was not ready to give. After the police and the disgraced couple left, a hush fell over the house. Barrister Cone spoke gently to Shade and Tunde, explaining that their mother's sister, Auntie Kimi, had been contacted and would take them in. The teenage siblings nodded numbly. Their world turned upside down. They glanced repeatedly at Bisi, now revealed as Omolade, with remorse and uncertainty. Bisi herself stood in the middle of the living room, tears still glistening in her cheeks. She was free, and more than that, she was the owner of this house, the true heiress of the Ajayi family. It didn't seem real. It felt like a scene from one of the dramas she had watched before. Slowly, Shade and Tunde approached her. Tunde was the first to speak, voice low and filled with shame. Cousin, we didn't know. We are so sorry for everything. Shade nodded, wiping her eyes. I'm sorry, sister, for how I treated you. If I had known, even not knowing, it was wrong. Please forgive me. She reached out as if to hold Bisi's hand, then hesitated, unsure. if she had the right. Bisi looked at the two who had tormented her daily. A part of her wanted to resent them forever. But staring at their tear-streaked faces, she realized they were as much victims of their parents' lies as she was. They had been taught cruelty, and now we are left with nothing but regret. She gently took Sade's hand, squeezing it. I forgive you, she said gently. All of it. I hope you both learn from this. I don't hold any hate in my heart. Both siblings broke down in fresh tears at her words, overcome by her grace. They hadn't expected forgiveness. Sade hugged Bisi, a genuine hug, and Bisi patted her back, eyes wet but calm. Tunde stood by, with his head bowed, relief on his face at her acceptance. Barrister Kon stepped forward, clearing his throat gently. Miss Omolade, he said respectfully, I know this is a lot to take in, but we should discuss what comes next when you are ready. Legally, you are now the rightful owner of this home and the primary heir to your father's assets. There will be formal processes, but rest assured, I will help you through all of it. Bisi Omolade looked around the room. The grandeur of it no longer oppressive. It was hers in truth. She nodded to the lawyer. Thank you, sir, for everything, for not giving up on my parents' case. He smiled kindly. I loved your father like a brother. I could never sit easy with how things ended. I only regret it took so long to right this wrong. But the truth has a way of coming out eventually. Molade glanced at Baba Musa, who had been watching quietly from near the doorway. She walked over to him. To the old man's surprise, knelt at his feet, briefly in a gesture of deep respect and gratitude. Thank you, Baba, she said, her voice full of emotion. You kept telling me God was watching. You helped bring justice. I will never forget your kindness. He gently raised her hand, his eyes misty. Ah, Madam, no. I'm just a servant, he protested softly. She shook her head. You're family to me. Please stay. I need people like you here. He smiled through his tears. I will stay as long as you want me to. God bless you, my child. That night, after Shade and Tunde had packed some belongings and been taken to their aunt, and the police and lawyers had finished their work, Malade found herself alone in her mansion, except for a couple of long-time staff like Baba Musa and Mama Tayo, the new cook. She went to her small room in the boys' quarters, the one where she had spent so many miserable nights and gathered few personal items she had, the battered Bible given by Mama Aina, the little bracelet from the photo, which she now knew was hers as a baby, and a half-written diary she kept of her feelings, mostly prayers and hopes scribbled on scrap papers. Standing in that cramped room, one last time, she felt a mix of sorrow and relief. This place held her worst memories, but it had shaped her into who she was, a survivor. She whispered a goodbye and walked out, shutting the door behind her forever. A week later, the sun rose over Ikeja with a gentle warmth. In the Ajayi mansion, her family home, Omolade stood on the balcony of the master bedroom, looking out over the compound. The early morning light glistened on the dowy lawn. The flowers along the driveway fluttered in a soft breeze. It was peaceful. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. For the first time in years, she wasn't rushing to make anyone's tea or scrub floors at dawn. She was simply enjoying the morning air. A soft knock sounded at the bedroom door. Omolade turned to see Mama Tayo, the new cook and a new housekeeper, coming in with a tray. Good morning, my dear, the older woman smiled. I brought you some tea. You woke up early again. You should rest more, eh? After all the stress. Omolade smiled and moved to take the tea from her. Thank you, ma. I'm used to early mornings. She still wore a simple dress and flat sandals. She hadn't changed her humble style overnight. In fact, she had asked the staff to call her by name, not madam. At least, until she got used to all this. Mama Tayo regarded her with affection. The cook had been astonished by the revelations. You know, it still amazes me, she said, shaking her head. From house girl to madam of the house, just like a movie. God is truly great. Molade poured some tea, the aroma of ginger and lemongrass rising. Still feels strange, she confessed quietly. Sometimes I woke up thinking I have chores to do. Mama Tayo totted and patted her shoulder. Don't worry, you will get used to it. Just never lose your good heart, my dear. You will be a far better madam than those ones who left. That's for sure. Molade nodded, a thoughtful look on her face. I know what it's like to be treated badly, to have nothing. I don't want anyone around me to feel that way. Not in my home, not in my father's business. Nowhere I have a say. Later that day, Aristocom visited to finalize some paperwork. They sat in the living room, she on the sofa that she used to silently dust around, and he in an armchair. As a signed document transferring the house deed and other assets to her name. He also updated her on the fate of Femi and Tony. They were facing multiple charges and likely a lengthy prison time for their crimes. Surprisingly, Molade found that she wasn't happy to hear of their downfall, but she wasn't sad either. It was simply the consequences of their actions. And the children, she asked. The children are with their aunt Kemi in Surulere. The lawyer said, I hear they are adjusting. It's a modest life, but maybe that would do them some good. They have also started counseling. It was a traumatic event for them too. Omalade was relieved to know they were safe. She had even insisted against the lawyer's surprise on setting aside a small trust fund for Shade and today's future education. They are still my family, she had said, and they will have to find their own way now. I want them to have a chance to become better than their parents were. It was an act of forgiveness and generosity that moved Barrister Okon deeply. Before leaving, the lawyer said, your father will be very proud of you, Omolade, not because of the wealth returned to you, but because of the person you have become. You have his integrity and your mother's kind heart. Omolade smiled, blinking away grateful tears. Thank you, sir. I wish I had known them, but I feel they are watching over me. In the evening, as the golden sun began to set, Omalade walked through the house, her slippers softly scratching on the polished tiles. She paused by the wall where a large portrait now hung, a framed copy of that precious photo of her parents and baby self. She had asked for it to be restored and displayed prominently. Looking at her mother's gentle face and her father's proud smile gave her strength. She stepped outside the backyard garden, where two young rose bushes grew, planted just days ago, one for her mother, one for her father, a living memory. Kneeling in the soil, Omalade pulled a few weeds and sprinkled water carefully at the base of each plant. Tiny buds were beginning to form on the stems. The sky above was painted with orange and pink hues. As the first stars appeared, she clasped her hands and said a quiet prayer, thanking God for justice, asking for wisdom to carry her new responsibilities, and praying for the strength to remain humble and good. A soft breeze carried the distant sound of a church choir singing and the faint call of muezzin from a mosque. The diverse sounds of Lagos evening. Molade felt at peace. She stood up, dusted off her skirt, and smiled. She thought of the many nights she had looked up at the stars from her tiny window, wondering if life would ever get better. Now she knew, even in the darkest times, she must hold on to hope and continue to do what is right. Truth had been delayed, but it was not denied. In the end, justice found its way. Omolade's life was forever changed. A lowly maid no more, but a beloved daughter restored to her proper place. Yet in her heart, she vowed never to forget where she came from. She would remain humble, kind, and hardworking, a true daughter of the people who loved her, both the ones in heaven and the ones on earth who stood by her. No matter how long it takes, truth and justice will always prevail. Be humble and treat others kindly, for the lowly today could be the mighty tomorrow. The dignity of honest labor and a humble heart is a treasure, and in the end, goodness will be rewarded. Thank you so much for watching this amazing story about Omolade on African Stories by V. If you liked it and felt inspired with her journey, please show your support by clicking the like button, sharing with your friends, and leaving a comment below. To see more interesting stories and learn about different cultures, subscribe to African Stories by V, and do not forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. The support means a lot and helps us bring more stories to you. Until we meet again, stay connected, stay inspired, and keep smiling.